draw for one of the great prizes that are hidden down there in the bushes, you need to have a ticket.
Yes, it should just be down there.
Okay.
Sorry, I've just had wardrobe malfunction.
So I'd just like to thank Sal Point for their sponsorship of the finale. And I'm also delighted, and I have got some slides. So I don't have a clicker, so maybe one of the guys in the tech can, get the clicker going. I'm delighted to welcome back Brenda Ratcliff from MindMeld Coaching. She's back again this year to facilitate the lovely panel. And I decided to interview one of Brenda's staff about her. So I'd like to introduce you to Winston.
Guys, we're also going to need the TV prompt on. Thanks.
No, that's not Winston. Here's Winston. And so I asked Winston, what have you got to say about Brenda? And here's what he had to say. I've worked with Brenda as an assistant coach for 4 years now. I started when I was 7. And my view is that she's a scheming little minx. On the first day in my job, she sent everyone off on a 2-day off-site, left me alone with her. She stuffed her pockets with grilled bacon so that I followed her everywhere. And now that I have imprinted on her, she's made everyone jealous. Be warned, this is what she's capable of. And in addition, I have to appear in Facebook posts like this one for the recent royal wedding. You've been warned. Anything could happen this afternoon. Brenda, I'm looking forward to our journey of evolution we're about to embark on. Over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And actually, guys, just turn me off for a second because I'm... Now, you were very clear with me. That perhaps we needed to have a bit of a dinosaur theme. So I thought I'd just get you started by pressing this button here. Just that one. You ready? Yeah. Are you impressed? Are you impressed?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
And so I also made you a little gift from me to you. Can you guess what the little gift is?
It's not the hat in your head, is it?
It so is. So... given that you have asked me to have a bit of a dinosaur theme, I'm going to bequeath my hat to you. Thank you, Phil, for taking that photo. So you can enjoy and wear this for the rest of the panel.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All righty. So I am Brenda Ratcliff and I'm your panel chair. Thank you for today. How has your conference been going? Fantastic, yeah. What particularly have you liked about it? The ice cream. Well, it's not going to be hard to do better than that, is it? What else have people been liking about it?
Singing.
The singing. Now, Victoria, that was you, I heard. You did some singing this morning.
I had a very large choir involved.
Very large choir.
Very large choir of over probably half this room was singing. Fine voices.
Let's see if we can actually match that this afternoon. And I thought just before we got started and introduced the lovely panel, I would do a very quick quiz to see who were the most digitally evolved people here at the conference. And so in order to do this, we're going to follow the last person standing principle. So may I please invite you all to stand. This includes the panel if you would like to. Here's your mission. Please sit down if you answer yes to any of these questions. We will not judge. Are you ready? Have you ever had to call over the assistant at the self-checkout aisle at New World? More than twice in one exchange. Okay, excellent. Do you still print out your Air New Zealand boarding passes? You have never read a book on a Kindle or an iPad. Ooh, what do you reckon so far?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. You have never gone on a date as a result of a dating app. Take a good look, everyone. Last question. You think the Ashley Madison scandal was funny, not terrifying? Oh, you asked what the Ashley Madison... Rebecca, tell you later. Okay, so here's our bonus question. Please sit down if you are busy recreating the vinyl record collection you gave away in your 30s. You didn't have one. So who are these four lovely people? So who are you? Pardon? Nathan, excellent. So you could be one of the foremost digitally evolved people here. Who are you? Hi, Rosamond. Lovely to have you. Tanya, and of course, Wayne. Okay, so guys, so we have here, of course, Andrew, who's up on the stage. So maybe the other four of you need to swap with this four. And let's see how we roll. Okay, so just as a very quick introduction to our panel, we have Carmen. So Carmen Casagranda has the, I think, wins the award for best surname ever. So we have Carmen, we have Shaun, we have Victoria, we have Andrew, and we have to give special ups to Andrew because he stepped in at 10:36 this morning when Martin couldn't make it. And we have Aaron. So we'll give them proper introductions in a little minute. And for now, I just thought I would set the scene of digital evolution. What would Charles Darwin think? So I've been thinking about this, and I recalled a time in November last year when I got to be more digitally evolved. Here we go. So that's the lovely panel there. We'll come back to them. Da-da-da. Right, so I got to be more digitally evolved. I'm going to have difficulty with that word. That's not good. Right, so what happened was I went to Seattle in November and I felt like I was taking Charles Darwin with me. How I got... Guys, that's not the one I expected. Right, how I got to go to Seattle was that my friend Zeng, who is part of Raygun, which are a crash test reporting organisation. She said, Brenda, come on over, you love science fiction. Boldly go, live a more Star Trek life. Well, that grabbed me at hello. Little did I know it was going to be a dystopian future, more like Logan's Run. So off I go to Seattle, pack my bags, and this is the view from Zeng's apartment. And you're very lucky that we get this photo because Zeng has Alexa. I'd never met Alexa before. I spent 3 days in the dark. I think that's because I have a Kiwi accent, so I couldn't ask to turn the lights on. Lights on in the study. Nothing happened. In Seattle, I Googled coffee near me. Yeah, exactly. Coffee near me. All Starbucks. All the coffee houses are now Starbucks. So those of us who are from Wellington, we know we like to have our own individual choice for coffee. Imagine going to a place where you can only have Starbucks. That, pardon me? Some version of hell. But certainly, well, you're now noticing how I was beginning to feel. So then I thought maybe we'll eat in. So Zeng went to get groceries. These were delivered from Amazon. Of course, now they can come to your door, but back in November, because that's like 1,000,000 years ago, we had to go to a fulfilment centre to get our groceries. So we had to go to, and it was when I heard the words fulfilment centre, I started to feel a little bit like I was in Logan's Run. It was not good. So there was actually lettuce in those bags, very odd. So I thought, I need something to boost my spirits. And you know when you're in an environment that's quite controlled, you know how bad behaviour can kind of leak out? But like today. Well, in Seattle, they have this thing called a gum wall, where residents come along and push their bubble gum onto a wall. And it fills the wall up once every 3 months, and they have to hose it off and start again. Odd, right? Day 3 of the holiday, remembered I was a mother. Thought, I'll get a souvenir for my 15-year-old from Seattle. So I said to Zeng, where are the shops? I'll go to the shops and I'll buy him a present. She went, no, you have to order it online. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you could try and go shopping. Well, in Seattle, there is a Macy's, a Nordstrom, a Levi's, and a Guess. And that is it. So the downtown shopping area where we were was smaller than Cuba Street, and definitely not as cool. So I had to order his present online from Amazon and get it delivered and then put it in my suitcase and take it home. And of course, because in Seattle, the reigning companies are Amazon and Microsoft, this is the biosphere that has been created by Jeff Bezos to contain all the plants in case of zombie apocalypse. So you can't go in and touch or do anything with the plants, you can only look at them. Then I thought I'd go and be a tourist, right? So I went to the Space Needle, closed. But right behind the Space Needle is the Museum of Popular Culture. I don't know if any of you have been there. I went in there, I was there before it opened at 10. They had to throw me out at 6:30. I spent the whole day there. Exhibitions on the Muppets, Star Trek, all my favourite TV shows, music, everything I could have wanted was there. And then, of course, I realised everything I love about my life is in a museum. So, yeah, that is my digitally evolved life. And so at the end, I thought, I wonder if under all this technology, whether she can ever become human again. And maybe that is what Darwin would have said to me about my digital evolution trip. So that is my introduction to digital evolution. And in a moment, not just yet, I'm going to welcome Carmen Casagranda to the stage, and we're going to practice a bit of clapping as Carmen comes forward. Now, I know from last year that we did this because public servant clapping is quite, what's the word? Restrained. Thank you, perfect word. So public servant clapping is quite restrained, and so we're just going to have a practice at clapping now. Are you ready? Just like normal, your normal clapping. Good. Alrighty, so that will be what I would call 50% of normal people clapping. So now we're going to try that and raise it to 80% of clapping. Cool. Alrighty. And last but not least, as I introduce Carmen Casagranda from Cigna, you're going to do 100% clapping. Okay, 100% clapping. Carmen, here's your clicker. Woo-hoo! Would you like a roar of the dinosaur to get you started, or are you all right?
Oh, why not?
Oh, okay. Come on. Come on, love.
How can you turn down a good dinosaur?
It's the left one.
The left one?
Yeah. Ready?
Ready?
What are you doing?
He's a broken dinosaur. What would Darwin think?
I think he'd be pretty impressed. Okay, love your work, love your work.
Okay.
Hardest thing you'll do all afternoon. Okay, off you go.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the intro and thank you for the pleasure of being here today. So we're going to do, our lovely panellists are going to be doing just a couple of minutes of presentations for you guys before we open it up for some questions. So only nice ones, please.
It's not
So
stopping.
you practiced this so wonderfully just before, so if I could please ask you to stand one more time. I know you've been sitting for today, and I know it's afternoon on a Friday, and we're kind of between you and drinks. So, okay, so fantastic. Who here's seen The Matrix? Good, good. All right, so I'm going to just use a little bit of Morpheus's words. What I'd like you to do is close your hand, close your eyes, and open up your right hand for me. Okay, so in this hand, you are holding a blue pill. So what this pill does, if you choose to take it, the story ends. You'll wake up tomorrow, it'll be exactly the same as today. It'll be the same as yesterday. So if you'd like to take this pill, please have a seat now and take your pill. Fantastic. All right, now please, can you raise your left hand for me? And don't fall over with your eyes closed. So in your left hand, you now hold a red pill. Now this red pill opens up immeasurable wonders, also immeasurable disruption. Think of it like taking a trip into Wonderland. So with this immeasurable disruption, yes, comes knowledge, but also chaos. So if you choose to take this pill, please have a seat. Now I'm going to challenge you today. You're allowed to have a seat.
What pill do you want?
I'm going to challenge you because I actually believe it's a magenta pill. I believe that we need stability. We need our companies to stay where they are, to grow, but we also need to disrupt and to change. I think we're living in a world now where things are very different, but actually if we lend ourselves completely to chaos, that's exactly what you'll get, as chaos and not results. I think we're living in a world now where, there is no digital native, there is no Generation X, there is no Generation Millennial. It's actually Generation C. So what is that? That is generation of the connected consumer. It transcends all ages, all geographies. It's all about knowing our customers and being connected with them. And at the end of the day, knowing our customers is one thing, but we also need a little bit of chaos as well. We need a little bit of imagination. Why? Because if you ask people what they want, they're going to frame it based on what they currently know. And that's great, but technology can give you so much more. Disruption can give you so much more. Throw in a little bit of passion, a little bit of energy, and you can dream. So we've seen slides like this before. You're all familiar. Everything's changing, and things are growing really rapidly. I think what's really interesting here is that the Internet of Things. It's all about data now. And predictions are basically saying that in the next couple of years, over 50 billion devices will be connected. 50 billion. That is nearly 7 devices for every single person on this planet will be connected. And the predictions are also saying that's only 1% of what can be connected. All of that information, all of that connectivity. Probably seen stuff like this as well. What's really interesting, radio took 38 years to reach 50 million users. Angry Birds, 35 days. What used to take 10 years in technology is now taking 12 months. So what happens if you go into, a requirements gathering phase and you spend 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months deciding what to do? What do you think's happening outside of your organization? Angry Birds. So, the world is changing. We understand that. But I think what's really key is consumers actually expect you to know who they are. They expect personalized offers. And they expect it when they want it, how they want it, 24/7. And this is my euphemism, but omni-everything. It's all about, no matter what channel you're going in, knowing what your customers are doing. Who here watches Netflix? Okay, keep your hand up if you've watched Netflix on your iPad. Okay, have you stopped watching Netflix on your iPad and watched it on your TV? What do you expect to happen? Yep, knows the show you looked at, picks up where you left off. And what happens if something went wrong and say you tried to, call the help desk at Netflix? What would you expect? They would know. I'm sure they do have a help desk. The point being, you'd expect them to know what you were watching and what you were doing. If you went from your iPad to your TV and then spent the next half hour trying to find the show again to find that it didn't load, would you use Netflix? No. So you need to understand customers, and that is about data and information. So what's kind of happening in the industry? I think there's some pretty cool companies doing some pretty cool things. So Trove, European company, launched in Australia last year. Basically, what you can do, you can take a photo and get on-demand insurance. It gives you to the second price on your premium. But what's really cool is if you're riding your bike into work, you can turn it on. And you'll get insured until you get to work when you turn it off. And you will pay that much of your premium. Say you came out at the end of the day and your bike was stolen, you could send in a clip or send in a text, and as long as you meet the conditions of your claim, be paid out immediately. Absolutely no interaction with anything other than your phone. Robo-advice. So again, Sure has been doing this for a couple of years. The Financial Markets Authority, the FMA here in New Zealand, are trying to overturn the law by 2021. to allow robo-advice. That's a long way away. Fortunately, they're opening up a sandbox this year. So sure, what are they doing? They use AI chatbots to interact with you, ask you natural language questions, and as it knows and learns more about you, it'll offer you personalized products and services that you can buy immediately online. Blockchain. Anyone not heard of blockchain? Good. You're not allowed on the panel. I mean, blockchain's interesting. There's a lot of, obviously, time, conversation, money going into it. It's still in its infancy. There's still a lot of use cases coming, but in the financial services industry, you start thinking about payments processing, claims processing. When you start looking, around government services, around your ecosystem and the sharing of data, it starts to present some really interesting conversations. Who here shopped on Amazon before? Fantastic. Do you know that they are so confident in their predictive modeling that last year they patented their predictive model because they believe with 97% accuracy that they can predict what you're going to buy on Amazon before you click buy now. And they're so confident in that predictive model that they use drones to start shipping what they think you're going to buy before you've hit buy now. And if you don't buy, the drone just takes it to the nearest warehouse. That's been up and running for a year and a half. Amazon again, another world first. In the US in January, they just launched their basically cashierless store. So you register on their app, you go in, take what you want, walk out. That's it. They pay for it all underneath the covers. So Visa, they partnered with the Olympic Games and decided that you could have a prepared wearable device. So, why would you want to take your gloves off if you've been skiing? All you need to do is take what you want, go past, swipe it, and it takes it off your card. They did that for badges, for gloves, and for necklaces. Everybody in the Olympic Village had one. So we're also seeing AI voice analytics. So I'm sure you've all used Siri, Alexa. So again, a huge growing area and something we're seeing a lot of change in. So why are companies doing all this? I mean, ultimately, it's about data. It's all a big data play. Why are companies trying to understand the data? Because cliche, but it is ultimately the new oil. It's where things are going and it's what's happening. If you think of everything that can be connected or that isn't connected, the person or the company or the organizations that understand that data are the ones that are really going to get a market differentiation, because at the end of the day, data gives you knowledge, but intelligence is actually about asking the right questions. So just wrapping up, there's a couple of other things that we're seeing. I mean, at the end of the day, yep, data's great, technology is great, but if you don't do something with it, it's just data, it's just technology. So what you're seeing is companies like 23andMe in the US, they're taking a loss lead on DNA sequencing. So less than 10 years ago, it was nearly $100 million to get your DNA sequenced. They're doing it for $100 now. Why are they doing it? They want your data. But they also want the data to start doing stuff like I was in Silicon Valley 3 weeks ago and met some startups that are doing precision medicine. So what they're actually doing is taking, say, the DNA sequence that is associated with having asthma. And then what they're trying to do is just pinpoint that piece of DNA and say, if we can change that DNA using precision medicine, then actually we can cure asthma or we can cure cancer. And again, all these things are changing so quickly. Already last year, Perth, virtualized doctors, we're seeing all of these things start to merge together. And I guess the key thing is that really things are changing so fast. Competitive advantage, what we think is competitive advantage today is transient. It's got to move, it's got to change. Speed is critical, but how do you do speed without creating chaos? How do you do speed with quality, with security, and everything else that starts to come in today's society? technology is critical. I heard a really interesting comment a couple of weeks ago, which resonated with me, which is, I think historically, as a technologist, a lot of people have said technology is the enabler. It's no longer the enabler, it is the actor. Because it is fundamental to everything that we do as organizations. It's how you use it that's key. And at the end of the day, the most important ingredient in all of this is the people, whether it's your customers, whether it's your staff. Look after your people and you will get amazing results. So just to wrap up, it's all gone. Can you go back? That's not the one I changed. Anyway, I did change it, but I'll say what I was going to say. So, I guess what I wanted to just leave you with, and you've been talking for the last couple of days about where things are going, is to really just encourage you to have a future-first focus. Because at the end of the day, if you only spend today thinking about today, tomorrow it will already be in the past. Thank you for your time.
So I'm kind of nervous about the magenta pill, very nervous, and I know that some of you will have questions. So as Carmen said, after all the panel speakers have presented, there's going to be an opportunity for questions via the Slido app. So questions for Carmen, please come in via the Slido app. And now we're going to do something exciting, which is draw a raffle. Now, can I check, has everyone got raffle ticket in front of them? This is your... everyone got one over there? Excellent. So, Rebecca, what are we drawing prizes for?
So we've got a limited edition Govis t-shirt.
Limited edition Govis t-shirt. Even I haven't got one of those.
A T-Rex
I want that.
T-Rex, excellent. And you stick that up somewhere? On the wall. Mm-hmm.
In the office.
Limited edition vinyl decal.
Ooh, excellent. Okay, so you ready? Do you want to shake it? How do you want to do it? Put your hand
let's
in.
give it a little shake. All right, you hold it.
Great. And
Ready?
you're going to draw two.
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 Okay. F35. Woohoo.
Come on
Yeah,
up.
come on up.
I'll get off the stage. Rebecca, do you want to go up there and take them up? XXL t-shirt, just deciding sizes.
Well done.
Congratulations. Yep.
You got to stick that on your desk.
And one more.
One more. F21. Woohoo. Congratulations.
I'll take those. Even I know from stats not to put them back in again.
Have fun.
Thank you very much. And let's give Carmen 100%. Woo, thank you. 100% for a future I slightly fear. Alrighty, so Shaun, you're up. So this is Shaun Hendy. He is Director of Pūnaha Matatini, and this is a New Zealand Centre for Research Excellence hosted by the University of Auckland. Over to you, Shaun.
Kia ora. I'm just going to stand over here because I need to see my slides, and our screen down here has de-evolved and is currently blank. I'm going to talk a little bit about... I'm going to start with Darwin. It's quite interesting. This is quite a challenge for me. I often talk to scientists about Darwin. I'm a scientist myself, and I often try and make a point about Darwin. So I'm going to compare and contrast Darwin with a contemporary, Jane Austen. So I'm going to ask you to vote for one or the other. We'll start with Jane Austen. You know, they're both contemporaries, and let's imagine the world today, what the world would have been like had Jane Austen been run over at an early age by a horse and cart, for example, or had Charles Darwin been run over at an early age by a horse or cart. So I ask you first, who thinks the world would be more different if it had been Jane Austen? Is anyone going to go for this? We've got a few brave hands going up. Okay, what about Charles Darwin? And I'll ask you to keep your hands up if you're voting for Darwin. Okay, given the theme of the conference, right, you've spent the last 2 days thinking about Darwin, so he's probably made an impression on you. What if I told you that had we lost Darwin, we'd be talking, the theme of the conference would, what would Alfred Wallace think, right? So there's a sense in which scientists are replaceable and people in the creative industries are not, right? And so I you can put your hands down now. I try and make this point to scientists that actually communicating and good communication is a really important part of their career. So in deference to Jane, Charles and Alfred, right, today I'm going to ask, what would Jane Austen think about algorithms that can read, speak, and make decisions? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about some of the projects. So I'm going to run through 4 or 5 projects, each of which has been done by a group of students that work at our research centre, a variety of students around the country, using algorithms to a lot of the time natural language processing, so trying to analyse large bodies of text or understand what people are saying, and then try and use that in ways that are useful to us. So I'm going to start off, and we'll I'm going to talk about politics, and Jane wasn't a big fan of politics. It's not mentioned a lot in her novels, and certainly this quote, right, suggested that she wasn't a big fan of political discussion. So what if, right, we could just, instead of having to listen to politicians ourselves, we could get algorithms that would listen to our politicians? Wouldn't that be great, right? You'd never have to listen to the radio again. You'd just get your summary of what they've been up to every day. Now, right now, luckily there's no ethics for algorithms. In the future, this might be more difficult, but we were able to do this experiment without ethical considerations, because obviously, right, doing this to algorithms, forcing them to listen to politicians is not a particularly pleasant thing, right? So, but let's put ethics aside and consider what we might find. So actually what we did is we fed Hansard to one of our algorithms. We took 14 years worth of data. So this goes over 2 years of Labour government and 2 years of national government, right? We didn't want our algorithm to develop a political bias in any certain way, so we balanced it. But there were 40 million words, right? So this is where the ethical problems come in. Who'd want to listen to 40 million words of politicians? The first thing we did was, who talked the most, right? So we took every section of text from Hansard, and we broke it down by the length, the number of words that people used, and we found consistently the opposition prattle on and on and on, whereas the government wants to say as little as possible. So there's quite a difference in the amount that's spoken by the opposition versus the government. We also found, curiously, that the last government didn't want to talk about housing. This is a plot. This is looking at the topics, the types of things that people were talking about, and you'll see that if you can read the data, basically housing became a very popular topic 2013 through to 2016. But you'll see that when we broke it down by national MPs, very few of them were speaking about housing. They were all actually talking about Canterbury and the earthquake rebuild. So that was one thing we discovered. And the other thing we discovered over time was that political debate has become more managed and in fact more polarised. If you go back in time and you look at the middle term of the Clark government, what we found was that politicians were talking to each other, right? So you'd have a group of politicians that were cross-party that might be talking about housing, another group of politicians that might be talking about the environment. What we saw over time, and these are diagrams, each of those dots is a politician, the size of the dot is how much they spoke, and then the colour represents their party, and the fact that you can see the blue clustering towards the end, this is the second term of the national government, means that the National Party, everybody was becoming on message. They were all basically saying the same things over and over again. Incidentally, there was one politician who we couldn't figure out, our algorithms could not figure out what they were saying. Does anyone want to take a guess? This person, may currently be acting as our Prime Minister at this very minute. So we still haven't cracked that one. That's something that artificial intelligence will have to grapple with for years to come.
Hopefully ethics come in.
And there may be ethical considerations there. That may kill that. Yeah, right, absolutely. What about Te Reo? So there's a nice quote actually from Sir Apirana Ngata, who was talking about using the tools of the Pākehā for the benefit of Māori and to ensure that the descendants of tangata whenua thrived. What about Māori spoken in Parliament? Does anyone have a guess how much Te Reo is spoken in Parliament. Anyone want to, as a percentage? I heard first one was 2. 2 is actually pretty much bang on. If you look, it just hit 2.5% a couple of years ago. So it's, and you can see, actually you can see when Sir Apiani Ngata was in Parliament, but since then there's been quite a vacuum, but today it's actually starting to pick up. And so actually we're helping develop algorithms now that can read te reo. There's lots of AI out there for English, or one of the other 4 or 5 major languages in the world, but minority languages, there's less algorithms out there. And that's partly just because of the volume of data you need to train these algorithms. But we've been helping build algorithms for te reo. One of the things that we've done is we've got the ability now to distinguish between English words and te reo, so we can do that. And we ran the New Zealand Gazette through this algorithm, so we can look at place names based on whether they're in English or whether they're in te reo. And so the red dots are places in New Zealand that have a Māori name, and the blue dots are places that have an English name. Absolutely staggering, isn't it, to see the difference between the North and the South Island. Quite remarkable to see that graph. So that was actually done for us by the New Zealand Herald based on our results. And then, if you are a fluent speaker, we're working with an organisation, Te Hiku, and you can actually go and you can help train an algorithm by reading passages of te reo to Te Hiku's website, and that will help improve and build these algorithms. So again, another project done by our students. And then, what we think will say, what effect does it have on the world, right? How do we measure the impact of what we think will say? This is another project that was undertaken this summer by one of our students. We were interested in mining the media and trying to understand how do government reports impact on discourse in the media. Does anything that government produce have any impact on what people think or say? We were quite interested in this topic, and so what we were doing is constructing what we call co-occurrence networks. So this is where we've gone out, we've mined the major news sources in New Zealand, online news sources, and we've extracted the names of people and the names of organisations that are mentioned in articles on particular topics. So this is a network, for example, of articles that refers to sea level rise, right? So we've picked out all the organisations and people that are mentioned in reports on sea level rise, and we were kind of interested that in how a particular organisation fared, right? So this is the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. So prior to 2015, they were quite peripheral to this discussion. But and you can see, we can zoom in, that's the PCE, they're not being mentioned much, and they're well on the outside, where you see international organisations being mostly the organisations mentioned in these articles. But after 2015, at the end of 2015, they actually put out a report on sea level rise, and we wanted to understand how did that change their position in this network? How much more influential did they become after this report came out? And the answer is considerably. Right? So if we look at the same network, a network of articles with the same search term post-2015, you'll see they've moved right to the centre. And in general, this is what, when we've evaluated the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment, this is what we've seen, that their reports actually become quite influential, and after their report comes up, they'll move right to the centre. Incidentally, we can also see that more fringe voices move to the periphery. So when the PCE puts out a report, groups that perhaps have more fringe views actually move out to the periphery. And finally, I just want to talk about another thing that Jane Austen wasn't very much a fan of, and that's money. So, of course, money plays a kind of an interesting role in her novels. The people who have it don't deserve it, and the people who deserve it don't have it. But it can be useful in trying to understand people's lives. And so we actually looked, we've been using a Westpac data set. So they've been able to provide us with aggregated banking data so we can look at the community level where people are spending money and what they're spending it on. And over the summer, we looked at what happened in Havelock North. So this is, of course, the outbreak in in 2016, August 2016, when 5,500 people became sick due to a contaminated water supply. What effect did that have on their spending patterns? So this is the date. Yes, I can see some of you have read the graph very quickly. They started buying booze. That was actually one of the most significant findings. So here's this was the date that the boil water notice went out. So there's a little bit of a pause, but by a week later, they're buying considerably more alcohol. So I've heard various theories about this. Yes, so that's a pretty good theory. So if you didn't hear it, this is the only way you can get safe drinking water is to consume it with a good stiff drink. Yeah. Right, there we go. So interesting to see that reflected in what happened in our Havelock North. Actually, the other significant finding was that people started shopping elsewhere, right? So actually this was probably our major finding, is they left town and they went to Hastings, and they did their shopping in Hastings, and we saw that they were spending more per transaction. So in other words, they were making serious, rather than popping down to the local shops, they were travelling further afield and doing bigger shops there. And so what we're working on now is an algorithm to measure community resilience based on real-time changes in spending patterns for various communities around New Zealand. So some of this is kind of scary, right? We're starting to look at banking data. We're starting to see that data impacts on our life, and particularly we had that highlighted in your talk. But of course, I guess I'm a magenta pill. You know, none of us, it's a little bit frightening, but nonetheless, none of us want to be in calm waters all our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora, Shaun. Kia ora, Shaun. That was fantastic from the Jane Austen supporters. Yes, still get to have Mr. Darcy. It's now a chance for you to draw 2 people for the raffle, please.
Okay, F29.
Committee member, no, what, isn't it real? No, I'm kidding, Philadelphia. Yeah.
Give her a t-shirt.
Yeah. So, Philadelphia, what have you got there? A pencil case makeup bag, iPad bag, and your decal. Excellent. Thank you very much. Cool. Who else do we have?
Really shake it up there. Okay, that is, I'm going to say C68.
Hearts. Orange hearts?
Orange hearts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Come forth. Thank you. Oh, I got it. Thank you, Shaun. And I'd like to welcome back Victoria McLaughlin, Director of Strategic Development from the Ministry of Justice, who was wowing you this morning as a keynote speaker. So welcome back, because you get to book in the day. It's fabulous to have you.
Thank you. I won't make you sing. Well, maybe we will get you to sing.
And dance.
Okay, so Darwin, I thought I'd take a slightly different angle, which is I'm going to go back in time and say that we can learn a lot from history about what's happening with our digital evolution or revolution. But Darwin's often misquoted and misunderstood, so I'm going to start from there. So evolution is a theory of you accumulate more and more desirable attributes, and through that you're more likely to survive, and our genes go on and we continue and we get stronger. But the question I have is, who is actually defining the digital evolution? Who's actually saying what is good and what is desirable? And if we go actually back in time and look at who was defining it in Darwin's time, well, we get back to Victorian England. And Victorian England was all about the man. The man held the power. He actually, as a woman, when you got married, sorry, actually, you're now just part of his chattels. And he now controls your property, your money, your voice, your vote, because you don't have one. So fundamentally, Darwin actually constructed his theory to support the power of the day. He did challenge the church, we'll give him that. So he did take on God, but yeah, one thing at a time. So he did take on church and he did take on God, but he squarely made sure that, well, women were lesser. They were not as evolved, and therefore actually men could retain the power, the control of property. So that was one aspect of evolution. He was controlled, and there was a certain amount of who had the voice. Wallace. What about Wallace? So Wallace actually sent a letter to Darwin, and he had the same sorts of theories. His theories, though, came up slightly different. He had a fever, and in his fever, he started to think, as a biologist does, about, well, what was happening around why certain species died and some flourished, and he sent his letter off to Darwin. And some people now say that, therefore, Darwin stole his ideas, but it actually just gave Darwin a good kick up the arse. And why do I say that? Well, Darwin had been thinking his ideas for 20 years, but was a bit scared about taking on the church, and so actually hadn't really put his thoughts down on paper. And he did. He got The Origin of Species came out very soon after, but he deliberately wrote it in a very deliberate manner, which was to make sure that the general public could understand his book. And there very much was popular science of the day. So, but he also had very powerful friends, and those powerful friends again made sure his voice was heard. Versus Wallace came from a very poor family and didn't quite have the same network of power and control behind him. And I just thought this quote is often attributed to Darwin. It actually wasn't Darwin, sorry. It's very nice though, it makes it sound like Darwin was all about change and people. But it wasn't Charles Darwin, it was actually a management book out of the 1970s. So if you're quoting this ever, attributing Darwin, it's not his. So even Darwin's voice has been captured and controlled. So that brings me back to learning from history around who is actually defining this evolution. And what does that mean to us? Because actually all of us in this room are part of government and part of that thing called public service. And so actually our role isn't about survival of the fittest. Our role is about often helping those people who are most marginalised, who are not in power, who might be that Victorian England woman who didn't have the voice. And our role is about helping them in our society and increasing the richness of all of our society, not just the survival of the fittest. So what does that mean when we talk about evolution? Well, we actually need those voices to be part of that debate, and they need to be also part of defining what is happening in our areas of technology and in digital evolution. So they need to be participating in the development. So I look around this room and I go, sorry guys, this whole room doesn't really reflect diversity. So if we really want to be as, moving forward, we actually need more people from a much more diverse range of cultures, backgrounds, leading and designing our evolution so that the voices are heard. And we also need them to be participating in the development if they can't be actively leading. And that affects how we think about policies in our schools, our education, how we design a whole range of our policy in New Zealand. So there's also then how do people access government services or engage with us. So we also talk a lot about access to technology, and that one's become less and less of an issue over time. But what is increasingly becoming an issue is stability of access. So many people will have a phone, but that doesn't mean I always have data on my phone. So I may be stable for 20 days, but 10 days I have no longer got stable access. So it's not just about having the phone, it's actually about the stability of the access. And as we talk about speed of evolution, my phone that was great 6 months ago may no longer be adequate. And so how many of our services are we actually starting to make people not be able to access? So stability of access, which we don't talk a lot about, is going to be an increasing big policy problem for us as we go forward. The other aspect is how we design things often acts as a barrier to access to our services. I had an example of this, unfortunately, the other day. Someone came to me and went, we've got a form, it's going to go online, and if someone doesn't fill out the form correctly, they're going to be told and they won't be able to submit it until it's done. So that's going to be great. I went, no, it's not. There's a real access to justice issue because we don't know that someone couldn't fill out that form, they never could submit it, and therefore we have no idea that at that point in time they were trying to access our service. We should allow all forms to come through our door, because if we don't know that someone desperately needed a service that we provide. So just because we can doesn't mean we should. So I talk about this evolution because I worry at times that it is the privileged voice being heard. And we need to desperately make sure it's a diverse voice that's actively designing what that revolution in evolution is.
Thank you, Victoria. All right, so do you want to give them a good... Yep. Give them a shake.
Don't look, don't cheat.
Yep.
F19.
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 Excellent. Thank you. And one more?
One more. I'm not looking. Promise. Bribes will be taken later. F14.
No, didn't you just say that?
No, it's 19.
Oh, okay.
14.
F14.
They've left the building? 1-4.
1-4. Great. Okay, guys.
Great.
Thank you, Victoria. So let's give Victoria a very big clap. Thank you, Victoria. And it's definitely, again, 100% clapping for this lovely gentleman, because without Andrew Watkins, we would have had a gap this afternoon. So he stepped in today at 10:36 this morning to do this. So welcome to Andrew from New Zealand Transport Agency.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
So I'm going to press this button and see if anything happens. Oh. Yeah, okay. So this is going to be short, and there's this one slide.
You so understand us, yeah.
So I don't need that anymore. Okay. If you want to hear not what thought leaders in the organisations that you're in think, but what everyone like you thinks, then you do what my boss did to me today. You pick the day before you're about to launch and push to production a major new software service in our organisation and say, you're not too busy to go and do this talk, are you? So not only am I not particularly prepared, but I'm not even close to being prepared. But I do have a few thoughts. So this is a highly evolved creature in the Darwinian sense. It is entirely fit for purpose and fitted to the environment in which it lives, and could be thought of as a good representation or metaphor for government. Okay? Because up until recently, the environment in which it lives is very stable, and it has no predators, and it chases fruit, which doesn't run very fast. And so it doesn't have to move very fast, and so it has a pretty good life, actually. So Darwinian evolution doesn't necessarily mean change is particularly fast. In fact, it usually means change is incredibly slow. And most of Darwinian type evolution is aimed at not changing anything and keeping things the same. And when we talk about a species surviving, what that means, it's managed to avoid any change. Because if a species evolves, it usually evolves into a different species. And one of the tactics a species use to try and avoid evolution is to change its environment to better suit itself. And that's probably best illustrated by people who, for 2 or 3 million years, have busily changed the entire environment just to make sure that, if nothing else, they survive, although possibly not even that. So Darwinian evolution requires 3 things: reproduction, variation, and selection pressure. And I'm going to ask the question, why would you think that Darwinian-style evolution meant anything to the digital world? Because it doesn't have any of those characteristics. So it doesn't have reproduction. You don't get little bits of software going, get a couple of them coming together and making a whole bunch of little bits of software, except in specific genetic algorithms, I'll give them that. But generally, somebody has to sit down and write and construct stuff, okay? So do we see lots of different instances, like we see all the different people here, of digital solutions? No, we don't. We see a few major services concentrated in a few large hands. So there is only a handful of major social media, social network solutions available because of effects like the networking effect, or that's where all your friends are. If I was going to do a stand-up sit-down, I'd say, we could grade everybody by their first social media platform. The MySpace people and the Facebook people and the Bebo people and the bulletin board people and the Fido people and I go way back. Change within these areas doesn't progress by reproduction. It progresses by paying attention to what customers want and just changing your system to make it to match. Do we see variation? No, we don't actually. More and more of the digital solutions we see are exactly the same. And one of the reasons for this is because we've got better at understanding what our customers want, and we have techniques and processes that work out things like user experience and how human factors are affected by the way we interact with digital solutions. And so we tend to build on the back of the work that somebody else has done. So every graphical user interface you're using nowadays is based on work that comes from the Mac OS and from Windows and from the GEM environment and from the original words forgotten me, but the original Palo Alto environments and things that were designed way back. We don't actually keep reinventing, we just keep stealing. When you want to know what the best user experience should be for somebody who wants to make a journey, you copy the group that's doing it best right now. And so Uber, for all its failings in the social area, is really good at doing what I want to do, which is, I want to be over there, get in, I'm over there, and I walk out the car and I don't even have to find my wallet or collect a receipt or do any of my expenses and things like that. So they get it right. And that's why people adopted it. Now, if we want to do better than Uber, so in the NZTA, for example, we've released a couple of applications in our mobility as a service area. So that in Auckland, that's RideMate. In Queenstown, it's called Choice. There isn't a version yet available in Wellington, but these tools bring together in an application all modes of transport. So that's, I want to get from here to here, that's my customer experience, but I'm offered the choice of walking, cycling, getting in public transport, bus, train, ferry, finding a ride share, finding a taxi. Ultimately, the last choice, perhaps get in your car and make that journey. So we're actually able to use that tool to try and move people into the sort of mixed mode, more active modes, it's not worth getting in your car to drive into the city centre, believe me, especially in Auckland. But you do need to know what you're going to be able to do. So the variation is disappearing from our system as we actually do good work. Selective pressure, so that's the third of the Darwinian traits. So we see, as I said, humans modify their environment to avoid selective pressure. And we see digital organizations like Facebook and Google doing the same thing. They're modifying their environment to avoid competition. So they take out software patents, they buy up small companies that might prove to be useful to them or might prove to be successful competitors to them. So we're not seeing any of these Darwinian traits. In fact, every one of the things we see is what I would call Lamarckian. And if I had a nice picture, there would be Darwin and there would be Lamarck, a French botanist from the 18th century, who had a good stab at defining evolution and got it seriously wrong, at least as far as organisms are concerned. Because he said people and organisms acquire traits by the things they do. So the giraffe gets a longer neck because it stretches its neck through its life, and its children are born with slightly longer necks and things like that. And he sort of missed the point about the thousands of giraffes that have to die of starvation before longer-necked giraffes appear and things like that. So it doesn't actually work in genetics, but it does work in digital software. It does work in the world we're working in at the moment in terms of adopting digital solutions. We acquire characteristics, and as the environment changes, software particularly is really adept at adjusting to those changes. So that's why we were seeing those high adoption rates and Angry Birds, reaching so many millions of users so quickly, and then presumably disappearing almost as quickly. So I think my point to the panel is that we shouldn't be talking about Darwinian evolution at all. We should be talking about Lamarck. Anyway, how's this relevant to us? Okay. Predicting the future is hard. Actually, well, everybody says that. It seems to be a truism. But predicting the future is pretty easy as long as you watch Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh,
Science fiction is what it's for. I mean, they tell us how things could be, and there are some that don't show up, and there are some that do show up. And what we see when we watch Star Trek is those that are allowed by physics show up. So I have my communicator here with access to all the world's knowledge and a voice recognition. I have a computer, beam me up, Scotty. No, okay. So that bit doesn't exist because, as far as we know currently with physics, it's not possible. And of course, the digital revolution has made so many things move fast because they're digital, so they're bits. Their bits don't cost much to move around, they're easy to adjust, and that brings us to NZTA. So most of what NZTA does is build roads. It's not politically correct anymore to build roads, but we still do it. And that's because people mostly want to go from one place to another, and although the world is changing, it's still the main way that happens. And we've got a new government, and they've got a new policy statement, which is great. It's a focus on safety, it's a focus on mobility, it's a focus on livable cities, all of which we want. And it will take a little bit of time to bring that in to all the projects that are running. So we're going to obviously don't stop something you've started and just go, oh no, we're not going to do that anymore. So you finish those things. But as we start to do new things, they're going to be much more focused on that. And as a result, that brings me to what we were just doing this weekend. And I'm nearly finished. I'm product manager for the part of NZTA called Connected Journeys. And I'm responsible for an area that's called the Transport Operating System, which is essentially everything that you see that's going to go from sign beside the road that changes the speed limit that you're allowed to do, or one of those variable message signs that says, look out, there's flooding ahead and things like that, right the way through to the operations centers where people are looking out for incidents and things like that and responding to them. And even then, if to Twitter, and if you see a little message on Twitter from NZTA that says, the northern motorway is blocked by an accident, and here's a nice little picture of it and things like that. That's all part of the transport operating system. And that's traditional in the sense that it's built out of applications that got bought 10 years ago and cost a lot of money and are only used by certain types of organisation like us. And we've got a future ahead where the focus of all of those tools is on usability, on the customer's journey. And that's really changing the way we think. And that's one of the reasons why the new policy statement doesn't actually leave us feeling like our environment's been moved, because we were already thinking about how we make journeys much more successful for the people that are making them. So this little change we're doing tomorrow is quite simple in technical terms. We're just taking some of the software that we run in-house and we're moving it to the cloud. And one of the reasons we're doing that is so that we can change it quickly, so that we can spin up lots of servers and so we can distribute software to it. And that is my final point, which is if you don't know what the future is going to bring, what you have to be is adaptable. So you have to have capability to respond to changes in the environment. And this is where this poor guy doesn't succeed, because as soon as this bit of forest gets logged, this chap goes extinct. And I don't want my team to go extinct. So we don't actually know. I could have given you a nice presentation about connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles and drones and personal electric transporting devices, and where all the charge stations are going to be for your Tesla and things like that. That's all coming and it's all interesting. But at the end of the day, the customer experience actually doesn't need any technology. You just want to sometimes get on your bicycle and go for a nice ride, or go for a walk, or go and see your auntie and just drive down the road. So technology isn't really impacting on everybody's day-to-day business. But we do need to make the system safer, and we do need to give them those characteristics. And so NZTA is changing the way it works. It's becoming more agile. It's coming up with new projects that build a framework that allows the system to adapt, so that we can provide you with a state of truth of what's happening, that you can listen to it, that you can add AI to it, that you can come up with insights, not just us, but anybody who wants to join in the game. And so that is an evolution that I'm prepared to stand behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Love your work for the mention of Star Trek alone. So here you go. 2 winners, please, from the raffle.
Okay. Right, we've got 2 green stars, F12.
Where are you, lovely F12?
2 green stars, F12.
2 green stars. Okay, hand it over, we'll draw again.
Okay. 2 green stars, F51.
Oh, that's mine? No.
We've got a whole pack of jokers in here, yeah? 2 more green stars, F05.
Yeah, I reckon we'll just I'm going to rort it and just go, look at the orange ones.
Okay, this is 62C.
With the orange hearts. Yoo-hoo!
Yay.
We'll just do one more.
Yeah.
And in this case, just someone stand up. Yeah.
87C.
Oh, 80s. Great. Thank you very much, Andrew. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty then. So, lucky last, we have Aaron McDonald from Centrality. Thank you, Aaron. I've noticed as the talks have been going on, you've edged further and further along, and you've had kind of like one leg off, so kind of ready to go. So this moment is yours. 100% clapping for Aaron McDonald.
First of all, I just give a little bit of an overview because maybe not everyone knows who we are. So we're one of the largest blockchain studios in the world. So when I put my hand up before, I was being a little bit cheeky. We're based in Auckland, New Zealand, with locations all around the world. got about 100 people directly in our team and about 250 in our ecosystem. So a 2-year-old company trying to do some really cool things to improve the way that people's lives work. I thought I'd put this up there for 2 reasons. I'm the last person before we have drinks, and I'm actually one of these men, so maybe I should sit down again. No, seriously, I've got some interesting things to say. I've always been a big believer that technology has the ability to make our lives infinitely better. And I think if we look at all the examples the guys have talked about today, there are some interesting ones in there that both have that potential and probably could make our lives worse. I mean, you look at the great things that Amazon has put out there, but for all of its genius, Amazon's actually a logistics company which makes its money off of paying most of its workforce minimum wage or less. So you've got this great kind of technology story on top of this really bad human story. And I think that's something that's becoming more and more evident with technology. This is a Darwin quote, so, well, hopefully, maybe I'm misquoting here. If the misery of the poor can be caused by the laws of nature, but not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. And I think we're at this precipice right now, where technology is not fixing one of the most fundamental issues in our society. It's actually making it much worse. And this is inequality. For all the cool things that you can do with data and information and AI and all that kind of stuff, actually what's happening is a great concentration of that power. If we think of the digital age as the age that we're in and moving further into, then data is its currency. And the currency of that new digital age has been hoovered up in massive amounts by companies and corporations. And that's an interesting thing. You know, we've got this evolving self in this digital space, and the key ingredient to that evolving self is data, and that data is increasingly be owned by companies. So let's look forward a little bit through some digital evolution and see what that might mean in the future and what we could do about it. So a little quote here. In retrospect, it might have been a mistake to give Facebook all my personal information in exchange for seeing what my high school friends eat for dinner. And this, I would say, is the first stage of digital evolution. You know, it probably started 45 years ago or so, but really caught on 10 years ago. And this company now, and its peers around the world, have amassed vast amounts of information about the virtual you. They know what you like to do, they know what you like to eat, they know where you spend your time, they know who your friends are, they know what you're thinking. We heard about this predictive analytics before. So they're actually building up a very rich picture and creating a digital you. And that digital you is actually existing inside of the Facebook service and their peers in the world. They've got a little thing that reads this information and takes certain actions. It's the virtual you starting to act in the digital world. Next step, great Kiwi tech company here called Soul Machines. So Soul Machines is working on the next evolution of that. How can we create this individual AI? How can we create a personal AI that represents me and can start to be a digital human in the digital world? So another really cool tech innovation with some really profound implications in terms of things that we could do for our society. But it's a company storing all this information, building these profiles and these pictures of us, creating the virtual us. If we fast forward to the future, this Star Trek kind of world here, maybe you've watched this program on Netflix, Altered Carbon. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to do it. I'll explain a little bit without trying to put too many spoilers in here for those who haven't seen it. But I think it gives a very good representation of what a future could be like if we don't stop some of the activity that's happening now. And in this future, it's possible to create a virtual self that exists inside a bit of silicon. And that bit of silicon is transportable between meat sacks, human bodies. And I can jump from one to another, and I can essentially extend my life forever. Again, in this world, you'll come to find that a very small group of privileged people have immensely more powerful than the average individual. So what could we do to change this future? We want all the good things that data can provide us and AI can provide us and digital futures can provide us. And we want those cool experiences like Uber to exist because it makes our life easy and convenient. Well, it's actually possible to have your cake and eat it too. And that's why we're working on blockchain technologies, because it gives you the power to create technology systems that aren't owned by corporations, to put your data to work in a system where that corporation doesn't have access to it, to create economic models which encourage equality in the ecosystem and make it easy for you to break out of it if you're not being treated fairly. Decentralization should create a better world for everyone, and it's an important thing to try and get your head around, because without it, we go to centralization. There's this kind of black and white space here. We're seeing centralization now, power, money, information, influence, and that's having an impact even in governmental processes and elections and democracy. And that's a very scary thing, because that's our bastion of hope that protects us from things that are bad for us in these kinds of power struggles. And if democracy can be influenced this way, and even your own thoughts surreptitiously, as smart as the human brain is, it's not clever enough to pick up these underlying emotional cues or signals that AIs can feed us and through the data interfaces that we look at online. And so if we have these two worlds of centralization and decentralization, there's a few things that are interesting about that. One, I think the most obvious thing is just maths. If you have two worlds, a centralized world and a decentralized world, the chance that any of you are going to be in the centralized world is very low. You're most likely going to be the loser in that world. In a decentralized world, the chance of you being a participant in that world is going to be much higher. I think the second thing is, as much as companies like to say that they're going to make the next version of their product better, or we promise to be good citizens, they change. Corporations are driven by people, people have personal and individual needs, and those kinds of things always flip over time. You look at all the classics out there, Mark Zuckerberg on BBC, half a year into Facebook, I'll never sell your personal data for advertising. That's what he said. He got up on TV and said that. And we live in this world where even the people with the best of intentions can either change their opinion over time or have it changed for them. And so we can't trust companies to do this for us. We can trust a decentralized system. And lastly, I think this is one of the most interesting things about the space, and it's why we're working with people to create tomorrow together, is this is something that we can all do as a community. And the underlying thing, I think, that as a technology influencer in the government space that I would encourage you to do is look at working as much as possible with open source systems that aren't controlled by a corporation. If you're buying something, procuring something, there will most likely be an acceptable or even better version in open source that isn't sold by a vendor. Take a real hard look at decentralized systems so that you can try and create a democratic effect in technology where everyone can participate in growing that economy, improving that economy, participating in that economy. If we can do those two things, then we might not end up in a world where a very small number of companies control and own our virtual self in a digital world, and we could have some more control and own our virtual selves in that world. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, for the hope inside that. So we're just going to draw one now, and it's going to be really good because it's for, yes, Rebecca, the dinosaur light. I know. It beats my one, doesn't it? Hands down. Yeah, okay, so here we go.
Winner, winner.
Yeah.
And we've got 13F, F13.
Woo! Hooray! Well done. Thank you. Thanks, Aaron. So we have time for a couple of questions that have come in. So we're just going to roll with the top two. So Rebecca, these should be appearing. They should be. Right. So we're going to do the top two. Okay. First one from Matt. So Matt, you've asked, how do you avoid building your biases into the algorithms you build? So clearly this is not a question for me. Who is this, Matt? Who is this a question for? Oh, probably Shaun, this is you.
Yep.
Okay, can you see it up there? How do you avoid building your biases into the algorithms you build?
Yeah, I mean, so the answer is you can't.
Oh.
And I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that you do need to be aware. I mean, you know, one of the standard things that'll happen is if you're worried about bias, you know, maybe you're worried about racism or sexism, you'll turn that variable off in your data set, and then you'll then go out and claim, well, there was no information about gender or ethnicity in my data set, so therefore my data set isn't biased. Well, all you've done is you've turned that into a black box, right? Because that data was collected by someone at some point, and you know, by some institution, and of course those, you know, all those institutions and we all have our own biases that we bring to a data set. So I think one thing that you can do is try and make your algorithm transparent. So that's something that we work on quite a lot. That's actually really difficult sometimes. And I don't think it's a solved problem entirely, because, you know, if you're using machine learning, it's often very, very difficult to understand why your algorithm is giving you a result, a particular type of result. But that's something we work on a lot. And so just an example, we have worked with child protection data and predictive risk modelling, and we've the standard predictive risk models use around about 100 different variables. So it's very, the regressions run on very large numbers of variables. It's hard to tell if there's bias in it. We've managed to reduce that to about 3 or 4, and it's very, very transparent to the extent that a social worker can actually look at how the algorithm reached a particular decision. So there's a bit of a long answer, and we're trying, but it's still a work in progress.
Response? You good?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that it's probably the only way you can do it. I mean, software at this point is written by humans, and humans have bias, and the best thing to do is a mix of what you said, make it open and get more diversity in the technology space, because only those two things right now are going to solve for it. I mean, there's some interesting projects out there to algorithms themselves that look for bias in algorithms, but that's kind of Pandora's box there a little bit.
I think you'd also need to regard it as not a one-step activity. So the point is that anything that you build, you're looking at how it works and what the outcomes are. And if you're not getting the outcomes you actually want in society, you need to get back into the debugging. You actually need to keep trying and persisting and adapting your algorithms until you're seeing the right results, which of course the Victorian society would have defined in one way, and our society will define in another way.
Yeah. Great. Are you happy with that, Matt? Yeah, good answers, eh? Thank you. All right, excuse me, just need to read this. Ugh, high heels. In the age of digital evolution, what do failed projects like Theranos teach us? So who is this a question for? Who asked this question, James? Right, over there. Right, who is this a question for? Okay, team, this is where you look, especially intelligence, and give it your best.
Look behind the scenes, don't just look at the story. I mean, the problem there was the same as Juicero. It was just, lots of talk and not much actually happening. So it's an interesting case study in how the valley works, and how that model has created a situation where something like Theranos can happen. But I don't think it's entirely reflective of the industry as a whole. Certainly bad apples in there, but just do your research. It's probably the only way to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard problem. I mean, we see this in science as well, where people kind of anticipate what's coming, and you want to be the first to get there, and they cut corners to get there, and so it's a sort of a well-known problem in science, and as in technology as well. So yeah, due diligence and again openness and transparency. Yeah.
So thank you all for your questions. In the interest of time, I'm going to suggest that the questions that are there and the ones that are still in your brains, I ask you to hold on to and ask the panel either after the conference is closed or at Drinkies. Does that sound okay? Yeah, okay. So I'd like to thank you all very much for coming and making the Govis finale, What Would Charles Darwin Think, such a success. Let's do 100% clapping for the panel. Thank you very much. So, Mike Bullock, can I invite you? I'll come down actually a little bit of the way to you. How about we come over here? So Mike Bullock is one of the conference sponsors from Datacom, and Rebecca thought it would be lovely if you could please draw the final prize, which is deeply cool. Again, even cooler than the dinosaur lamp. So what have you got there?
This is a E58 pocket drone. For the technologists out there, this is very cool. Yes.
Extremely cool. And luckily, you've already won a prize from the raffle, so you can't do the embarrassing thing of drawing your own ticket.
Embarrassing, I'd be quite happy with
Oh, yeah. Okay, right. Okay, so here we go. 3 times for luck.
All right, here we go. And the winner of this fantastic pocket drone goes to... Is it that way or that way?
No, that way.
That way. C86.
Ooh. Oh. Yay, you have it! Excellent.
Congratulations.
You can keep, yeah, exactly, yeah, validated. Thank you, Mike. Okay, and thank you, Rebecca. I'm now going to ask you what you have in that little box.
What have I got in this little box?
Yeah.
That I thought the panel might enjoy later
Shall I come and help you with
You
that?
could help, yeah. That'd
Okay.
be great. Because we do appreciate your time. You want the whole box? Well, I've got to keep because they've probably got names on.
Oh, they have. Right, Aaron. Thank you.
For next year's conference are set as the 20th and 21st of June, so you can go back and mark your diaries for that. We'll have a survey out next week, so please fill it in. There could be a free ticket to next year's conference in it for you. And of course, we've got another prize to draw. So Rajesh, are you still here? So yes, the lateral security had a selfie day photo competition. There's more wine up for grabs. So is Blair Timperi here? Come on up. We should have had the photos up on the screen.